All right, well, let's go ahead and get started.
All right, good afternoon.
All right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our next coffee break webinar entitled Program Evaluation and Practice, a case study of Central State University STEM Success Center. If your part of the world is like my part of the world, hopefully you really have a nice hot cup of coffee with you to help you stay warm because it is cold outside. Before we jump in, let me go over a few housekeeping items. It's important that you have the opportunity to ask questions, so use the question function on your computer to be able to do that. And we have with us today our outreach coordinator who will be helping to moderate the Q&A as well as address any computer issues you may have. And let me introduce myself. I'm Lana Rux, Principal Consultant of the Rux Group. The Rux Group is a research and evaluation firm that gathers, analyzes, and interprets data to enable our clients to measure the impact of their work. We were formed in 2008, and over the past several years, we have worked with primarily higher education institutions and grants funded by federal agencies such as the National Science Foundation, Department of Education, and Department of Labor. If you participated in any of our previous webinars, you know that I often talk about how there are usually two broad motivations for evaluation. The first is proving, using evaluation to essentially check a box to say that it's done, and improving, which is focused on using evaluation for continuous improvement purposes. And it's my belief that proving or accountability purposes is usually nested within improving. So today builds on those concepts by discussing the continuous improvement cycle through an actual example. Specifically, we want to show how an evaluation finding was used by the project team. So I'm thrilled to have with us today Dr. Marikino Kuti of Central State University, who among many roles is the program director for the STEM Success Center. So let me turn things over to Dr. Kuti so that he can provide more information about his background, as well as information about the project that we will be discussing today. Dr. Kuti?
Well, good afternoon, Dr. Rox, and good afternoon to our listening audience. As Dr. Rox said, my name is Muraki Okuti. Not only do I work at Central, I'm a proud Centralian, or Morada, class of 1985. I went away, got my master's and a PhD, and I came back. I've been working at Central State for 29 years. And although my full-time job is the director of the Office of Sponsored Programs and Research, I have great interest and passion in ensuring that our students succeed. So I work on several student success programs, one of which is the STEM Success Center, which I'll describe later on. But we also have scholarship programs. We have programs that also provide internships and other experiential learning opportunities for students. And the reason that I work at Central State and the reason that I work on student success program is because I know the power of education to transform human life. As you may know, the single thing that can predict a person's future economic status is a bachelor's degree, regardless of race, age, nationality. Once you have a bachelor's degree, we can pretty much determine what your social economic status is going to be. So that's the background for this program and why we know that education is important. So next slide, please. So although I'm the one speaking today, I want to give credit that the STEM Success Center is a project funded by the U.S. Department of Education. It's funded under what is called the Minority Science Engineering Improvement Program. I am the project director. My co-project director is Dr. Ibrahim Katampe, and the STEM Success Center manager is Dr. Linda Thomas. She's actually the one that makes the train run on time and all that stuff. She talks to students and all that. The center is designed to improve the quality of underrepresented students, especially female, to make sure that they're ready when they graduate from Central State to either get a job or to go on to graduate school. We have three goals to help students succeed at Central State. One, which is what we're going to discuss in detail today, is to establish a comprehensive learning system for students, which means tutoring, academic support, in classroom, outside the classroom support, to address the deficiencies of STEM students taking specific STEM classes, which are called gatekeeper courses. In order to do that, we established a physical location for students to come and enjoy our services. But we'll talk more about that since because of COVID-19, we've had to change our plans drastically. And the other goal for our students for the program is to make sure students enjoy experiential learning opportunities, meaning they can see, put their hands on what they're doing, either through internships, uh, uh, research opportunities, and other experiential learning opportunities where students can learn. So the goal of the program is to retain students, making sure they come back to school, persist, to make sure they continue to onto their academic studies, and finally graduate.
All right. Well, great. Thank you very much. That really great background. So essentially, as I said, the purpose of the webinar is for us to demonstrate how evaluation can inform the continuous improvement process. So to do that, we'll share out first an evaluation finding, and then Dr. Kuti will show how that information was actually used. And then, of course, you'll have opportunities to be able to ask questions. So make sure to use that function. So let's go ahead and get started. For our first evaluation finding, let's look at how the STEM Success Center impacted on grades. And as Dr. Kuti noted, part of the STEM Success Services, part of the comprehensive learning services, is to provide tutoring. So to measure the impact of tutoring on grades, we were fortunate to have a natural experiment in which three different conditions emerged. First, we had students who participated in tutoring and received a stipend. Then we had students who participated in tutoring but did not receive a stipend. And then there were students who did not participate in tutoring at all. When looking at the findings, there were several kind of interesting trends that emerged, but I want to highlight two. The first is that in regards to withdrawals, students who participated in tutoring, whether they received a stipend or not, experienced a lower frequency of withdrawals than those who did not participate. And in a similar vein, that pattern emerged in terms of students who received Fs, such that those who participated in tutoring had a lower frequency of failing than those who did not. And then that was also intensified for students who received a stipend. And for students who were in that condition as well, they also received the highest frequency of grades, of A's. What's also interesting to point out is that those who participated in tutoring and received a stipend participated in almost 5 times more tutoring sessions than those who participated but did not receive a stipend. So let me pause there and turn it back over to Dr. Kuti.
Thank you. So, how did we use the findings that Dr. Rox just explained? One thing that she said was, you notice that the people that received the stipend, and let me explain what we mean by stipend. Mm-hmm. To get the stipend, you had to participate in a minimum number of sessions during the semester. And it was that you could only miss 2 tutoring sessions in the first half and 2 tutoring sessions in the second half of the semester. So the more you went to tutoring, the more benefits you got, and then you received a $100 stipend in the first half and $200 in the second half. So in other words, we were trying to incentivize students to come to tutoring. And as Dr. Rox just explained, tutoring was effective in that it increased students' performance. And the interesting thing was that once we got the findings from Dr. Rox and we showed the faculty members that your students that came to tutoring performed better, some faculty members made tutoring mandatory for their class. Some gave an incentive financial incentive. Some gave incentives in the form of grades. So when we showed the faculty members that those faculty members that made tutoring mandatory or gave significant incentives, the students performed better. We were able to encourage other faculty members to either make tutoring mandatory in their class or to give incentives as well. Next slide, please. One thing we also learned was that faculty engagement is the most critical factor in ensuring success. And what we mean by that is faculty that promote tutoring in their class, faculty that persuaded students through incentives or just through talking about tutoring in their class, and faculty that followed up with students and said, did you go to tutoring when I gave you an assignment? And if you did not do it well, did you go to tutoring? Uh, that will help your grade. So what we were able to do was convince faculty members that their participation beyond the financial incentives that we were paying was critical to student success. Next slide, please. So, as you know, the purpose of the entire exercise is to ensure student success. One way, perhaps I don't know any other way, to measure student success is through grades. Are you getting an A, a B, or a C? And when students saw A, B's, and C's on their transcript, or that made them more likely to participate. So, and as we said earlier on, we want to retain students, make sure they come back. But we also, when they come back, we want to make sure they persist to the next stage. So, by students getting good grades, and by them coming back to school, it let them know that good grades would mean academic success throughout my stay at Central State University. Dr. Rox?
Very good. And not to kind of belabor a point, but it is just so very encouraging to see how you gleaned so much information out of those findings. So let me pause there for a minute and turn things over to Elise to see if there are any questions.
We do have a couple of questions. The first is, how did you communicate with faculty to share the findings? Did you make the ask for a particular action, or did they provide the actions as a solution?
So before COVID, you could go to people's offices. So we actually, once we got the findings from Dr. Rox, the project staff and I, Dr. Katampe and Ms. Shepard then, we met with, so we have two major departments that we're working with. We're working with the math department and we're working with the natural sciences. So we called a meeting with the faculty, with the chairs, sat around the table with the faculty members, and just like you could see the results of the findings today, we just showed it to them that these were your grades before tutoring, these are your grades with students that participated in tutoring, and these are the students' grades that did not participate. So that's how we persuaded them to understand the findings.
And I should also just add in something that I forgot to mention before too, is that those findings, that trend emerge over several terms. So it wasn't just, even though what was presented in this presentation was for one term, that trend emerged over several terms as well.
Thank you for that response. We do have one additional question.
Okay.
How did you decide to recommend and then implement the action to increase courses based on the differences observed across the three groups? What informed whether the magnitude of the difference supports additional cost?
So as Dr. Rox explained, we gave stipends to students who had a minimum number of sessions, and were able to track students' grades based on their participation. So when we then went to the faculty members, we tied the grades to the participation. And we showed, so this did not happen, as Dr. Rock said, over a semester. So we had like 2 semester data. So we just laid the data of classes with heavy participation and stipends versus no participation and stipends. And I'm not So I'm going to try and be generic as possible. So we went to one class, and the participation was like 80%. And we looked at the grades of that class in the prior semester, the distribution between A, B, C's, and D's. And then we went to another class and we showed them C. The other class, this was a participation before incentives and before tutoring. This is your class. And because you did not make tutoring mandatory or offer incentives, your grades remain the same. And faculty are also evaluated based on how they promote student success. So that's how we were able to convince faculty members about the importance of the project.
And I'm also thinking that this is probably a good segue for the next evaluation finding, which specifically talks about retention. And I think that when we finish with that portion, we should probably loop back to this question, because I think that that actually helps to address the issue about the cost, because how does this impact on retention and some other items as well. So I'm going to actually just go ahead so that we can have time at the end to be able to tie that up in the bow.